Good morning, good people. Good morning. Good morning. Glad to have you joining me this morning. Glad to have you on. Um, this is Coach Smith getting ready to talk some sports, right? Love the game 24/7. Appreciate you joining me. I'm just getting started here, giving some people time to get on board and join me here on Facebook Live and YouTube Live. And so I appreciate everyone tapping in this morning to uh, Love the Game 24/7 podcast, coming to you live 11:30 a.m. Saturday morning Eastern time. And just thank you guys a whole bunch, and hoping just to continue to let this podcast grow and that you get the word out to your teammates, student athletes, you young lady, young man, and your parents of you awesome student athletes out there who are looking to um, develop your skill in your sport or sports to help you all be able to supplement your income or your education, I should say, for um, uh, going to the next level and earning yourself some scholarship opportunities. And so that's what we're always about here at Love the Game 24/7 podcast. And also giving updates about what's going on in the world of sports. We'll definitely be talking about all different sports. I saw earlier this week LSU got uh, beat again. Um, and so, hey, Coach Harvey, appreciate you joining me. Appreciate you, brother. Hope all things are going well back at CCC, getting those boys ready um, to make a run at the state championship and get you one. I'm praying and hoping. You know, you got support over here. So that's Coach Harvey with Cloverwood Central Catholic joining me on IG. You know, be sure you tell your, like I said, your teammates, friends, coaches, all of that. So let me get my headset on. I had my mic on, but didn't have my headset on. All right. But yeah, just want to be sure I let you know this is Coach Smith, Love the Game 24/7. And I'm doing some regular podcasts, usually twice a week. But just to give you a little bit of background and history about who I am, grew up in Florida, Tampa Bay area, St. Petersburg to be more specific, Pinellas County, P County, what we call it, and a lot of great football, a lot of great talent, um, uh, both boys and girls, a lot of great talent in all sports. You name it, we do it in that area, and of course, Florida, period. Um, and of course, there are some other places around the country that have great student athletes as well, college athletes and pros. But we've had a lot of come out of that area where I grew up, where I learned the game, to play the game, football, basketball, and track and field. Um, and so I have about I have over a decade of coaching high school football. I was blessed to play myself, high school and college, and the opportunity to play pro football. So you're probably wondering, like, how did this guy know what he's talking about? Well, that's how I know about what I'm talking about because I've been through it myself. Also raised two sons, and one of my sons, Jeff Smith II, um, he took on that same love that I did for sports and wanted to play at the next level. And he was blessed to be able to play high school, quarterback, college, start out at quarterback, then move to receiver. And now he's going on his fifth, sixth year in the NFL. And so that's how I will, confirm that Coach Smith and Love the Game 24/7 knows something about what he's talking about uh, when we're talking about scholarship and understanding the college recruiting process and making sure that you as a student athlete and as a parent, be sure you take control of your recruiting process. And if you got a great coach like Coach Harvey, who's joining me at Cloverwood Central Catholic CCC back in Florida, for you those student athletes, young ladies, young men that have great coaches, men and women that are coaching you, be sure you make sure that you're doing everything you can to be a great student athlete, great teammate, great team player, and then those things will come. Those things will come to you. those opportunities to get college scholarships. I know back at CCC, we're all about developing the young men and young ladies um, to be great people, not just great student athletes, but great people. And we've done that. And so I just want to be sure I extend my experience out here going viral and taking some time to share with you all about how to help your student athlete. I'm also a college financial aid administrator, 25, going on, well, I'm right at 25 years of financial aid experience. So I know from that standpoint on the cost of education side, as well as being a student athlete and also being blessed to play at every level. I had an opportunity to play high school, college, and pro football, following behind one of my older brothers who did the same. So this hopefully confirms or uh, verified that Coach Smith and Love the Game 24/7 knows a little bit about what he's talking about. All right. But I'm also, um, um, going to let you know about, like I said, being a college administrator and help you understand the uh, educational um, cost is no joke, whether you're in-state or out-of-state student, and anything you can do to help supplement your education, whether it's band, whether it's sports, even if you're a great student, but it's like everything is competitive. Even if you're straight good in your academics, it's not easy to get academic scholarships. Okay, just like it's not easy to probably get athletic or band scholarships. But when you are going to put some time in, mom and dad, to help groom your student athlete and develop them and invest in them to uh, do all they can, you definitely want to start at a young age. Middle school is where it should start. You never want to wait to high school to start your college recruiting process. It has to start early. But we'll dig into that. So I just want to share with you a little bit about who I am and what I bring to the table and my knowledge and wisdom that I've brought uh, to this platform, this viral platform, and helping student athletes. I'm here to help parents, empower you, student athletes, and also here to help some coaches as well. So I've been on that coaching side and understand how this thing works. And so, you know, parents, you got to work with your coaches, and coaches, you got to work with parents. But everybody needs to remember who it's all about, and it's about helping our student athlete become the best, young man, young lady that they are. And if they're blessed to get an opportunity to play at the next level, if they're blessed to get exposed and develop the way they should, to where they may be able to get themselves some college um, scholarship offers for their sport and their academics, you want to do that. You want to do everything you can to help cut your costs coming out of your pocket personally for your education. And so, because of what I knew from my own personal experience, I use that knowledge and wisdom to make sure I groom my two boys in the way they should go, all right, in their gifts and talents and their abilities. And so that's what I bring to this table, and just want you guys to understand, there's a lot going on in this environment today. We didn't have NIL, opportunities. We, of course, the transfer portal has been around for as long as I can remember. So that's been around. So that's not something new like NIL opportunities are. And so I'll get into more of that for my message today. But I just want to let you know I'm going to have some special guests next week, some NFL athletes, and one of them will be my son, Jeff Smith II. He will be joining me next week to talk about his recruiting process and sharing his experience, and also taking some questions. Um, so I'll be sharing more of that. I'm going live for leading up to the Super Bowl, because I know there's what they call the radio row that happens with NFL, um, where everybody has their podcast or radio shows or their viral shows and different things, and they have different guests. So as someone who's new to the game, I'm learning that stuff, and so I will be having Jeff Smith II, who is represented by GMB Sports Management Group, sports agency, who's also a direct partner with me with Love the Game 24/7 for our student um, uh, recruiting. So Garrett Blair, the owner and founder, who's also born and raised in St. Petersburg and grew up playing football with him. He's been in this business for well over 20 years. And so he's a great, great person to know. But he represents my son and has done a great job. And so Jeff is going to be on here next week, more or less near the end of the week, probably somewhere between Thursday and Saturday. But I'll be giving more information about that each night because I'll be going live every day next week from Tuesday leading up to the Super Bowl. I'll be going live. Um, and so I just want to make sure I get that out there to you. And also, my other son, I call Lucas Dennis, who was Jeff's roommate at Boston College. He's from the Boston area. He's also represented by GMB Management Group, Garrett Blair, who's with the Atlanta Falcons. He's going to come on as well and talk about his experience as a student athlete and share his recruiting and take some questions. So I'm going to have two pro athletes, my son Jeff Smith II and Lucas Dennis of the Atlanta Falcons, and Jeffers with the Arizona Cardinals. So, Coach, be sure you let some of your student athletes and parents know when I let you know exactly what day they're going to be on. Also, Coach Harvey, since you're on here, we got to get you and Jeff connected so we can try to get football camp or something going back at CCC. I know he's talked about that, but he's had instant family going right now. Two babies, so now they're starting to get their feet up under themselves, and of course, a lot of help from me and from Mimi and Papa. So just wanted to share that with you, Coach. So we need to talk and get Jeff to get down there at CCC and do a camp and do get something going. We got to do that, and he has talked about that recently. So we need to connect. But so I'll have that going on next week for my radio role for Super Bowl. So look to join me, like I said, every night next week from Tuesday up to Saturday, day before the Super Bowl. We will be having some discussion and talking about the game coming up and taking people's questions and different things of that nature. Also on Tuesday, I will give you Tuesday or Wednesday, probably Tuesday, I'll give you full detail about how you can partner and join the Love the Game 24/7 partnership. I have put together a 10 modules for a 10-week digital course. And throughout that 10-week digital course, we will be hitting on 3 points each week. It'll be once a week, probably starting at 6:30 in the evening and 7 o'clock, only about an hour or so, no more than that, and be able to give students and athletes and parents opportunity to ask some questions. But you got to be a partner. You got to join. I'll talk more about how you can join and be a part of that. So I'll give more detail about that next week. And I'll be offering some great benefits and opportunities that I'll be sharing to help dive into more deeper conversation and some things that parents and student athletes need to do and how to prepare yourself, how to develop, and things you should be doing. Um, and how you should live, nutrition, different things of that nature. Okay, but the main thing is also talking about how you need to be a great teammate. Be sure you can go out to my link tree, Love the Game 24/7 link tree, and get all my social media outlets. And at the very top, when you get to Love the Game 24/7 link tree site, you can click on that link and get the free ebook. Okay, I have a secure website. You have to sign up for the free ebook with your email. It's a secure site, safe. So sign up for that ebook, and it talks about my 6-step method, D.R.I.V.E.N. All right, the acronym D.R.I.V.E.N. It breaks down what that means and how you can be a great student athlete and teammate, and how parents need to go about developing their student athlete, and how a student athlete need to do certain things. But you definitely want to take time out and listen to that YouTube video. Um, and like I said, just go to Linktree and search for Love the Game 24/7 and click on that first link at the top, and you'll see it say free ebook. Be sure to get that free ebook and listen to that video and sign up and join Coach Smith. And I also have a Facebook group for Love the Game 24/7. I'll get more information about that, like I said, next week, so we can get this thing rolling and we can get this 10-week digital course going, and to be sure we help you young people out there and learn what it takes to play at the next level, what kind of effort and what kind of preparation, all those different things, from taking care of your mental health, taking care of your physical health. Be sure you're being realistic about certain things. But like I said, I make no promises about that you'll play Division 1, because that's not realistic. But there are athletes out there who can play Division 1 FBS, who can play FCS 1AA in Division 2 football. So that's who I'm more or less dealing with, because those Division 3 doesn't really give you they don't give scholarships like Division 1 FBS and FCS and Division II. So they do give academic scholarships. However, they don't give athletic scholarships like the other divisions do. So I'm more or less talking about athletes who can play at those levels, who have the potential and ability to possibly play at those levels, because they give scholarships. And in most cases, you could potentially get yourself a full scholarship. Okay, whether it be football, basketball, even some in track and field. I talked last week about the importance of, I believe, playing more than one sport to help you develop in your specific sport. Because I know track and field kept me from having a lot of major injuries, because I learned how to be flexible. I learned the importance of stretching. I learned the importance about how to warm up properly, and use that in my football career. And I never had a serious injury playing, but I'm not. Don't quote me on that. I don't have any medical proof that it does, but I don't recall any of my buddies I played uh, football with from growing up that ran track with me ever having a serious injury or anything of that nature. But I know it helped me excel in my speed and agility and all those different things, being a long jumper, being a sprinter, all those things, and how it can help. I don't care what sport you play and what position you play. Like wrestling is a good sport for offensive linemen, D linemen, and rush ends and linebackers. Um, and definitely, throwing a shot, putting the discus could be great for offensive linemen to learn how to be flexible, and to learn how to bend those knees and learn how to have balance. So those are a lot of things I shared. So if you haven't heard that, uh, if you didn't join that live, you can also go to my YouTube and check that live video out from last week when I talked about that, the importance of something, of playing two sports, and even how it can help you in your recruiting when some of these coaches out here, see that you're playing and excelling in more than one sport. That's a huge deal. It's very appealing to a lot of coaches. But today I don't want to hold you long. I want to just get on here and talk today about, I hear a lot of times people today calling student athletes soft, right? And I just have a little bit of concerns about um, people of the day calling or using the term soft for today's student athlete, right? When referencing, especially when they're referencing a lot of activity with the transfer portal being so busy. But some people got to got to understand there's we didn't see a whole lot of movement with head coaches, I should say, in college football today. Sometimes, depending on the season, and some teams haven't done well, you might see a lot of coaches losing their job. But we saw some decent activity this year because, of course, Nick Saban retired, and so somebody had to take his position, and the coach from University of Washington, from UW, took replaced Nick Saban at Alabama. So somebody got to replace him at Washington, and wherever that person left, somebody got to you have that stuff. And sometimes it may not be a head coach replacing another head coach. It could be a DC or OC. For you guys, people out there that may not know, D coordinator, DC, offensive coordinator, OC. So you when you have that kind of movement, you're going to have other coaches moving. So uh, we don't always see a lot of that every year with head coach in college sports, whether it be male or female sports. But there are those times where you might see some, excuse me, some activity. What I want to help people understand is there's much more movement every year with assistant coaches in college sports, male and female college sports. There's always movement with assistant coaches. And um, who has the relationships with the student athletes mainly? Assistant coaches. Assistant coaches are the ones that have a stronger relationship with the student athlete more so than the head coach a lot of times. Okay, because they're the ones out traveling. The head coach will travel sometimes when they're trying to get some of these top athletes. That head coach, I remember when my son was being recruited, hard at Boston College. Uh, Steve Adazio was the head coach, um, and he made a point to visit our home, along with Coach Ryan Day before he made it big at Ohio State. He made that trip to our home, had dinner, all that good stuff, right? Um, but that's when you will see head coaches doing more traveling. But these head coaches at one time they put their stripes in. They earned their stripes before they became head coaches. They were assistant coaches, GAs, grad assistants, so they understand. So when there's a lot of activity with assistant coaches moving, because all these guys, everybody knows each other. Everybody, at some point somewhere started out with each other at different places, at lower division levels, and have moved up, maybe even coached high school together, played college ball together. Um, and so when you see uh, these assistant coaches moving around a lot, you're going to have you're going to have some activity with the transfer portal. Okay. Um, and with that, sometimes the student athlete may get a offer. His assistant coach is leaving, who he has a good relationship with, and that student athlete needs to make sure it's not a false promise of a transfer opportunity, right, from an assistant coach that he has a good relationship with, right, that took another job going to a new school because he got an opportunity. These coaches are looking for their opportunity to move up, right? So these assistant coaches will take that opportunity to do that. And so sometimes they're going to offer a student athlete to transfer with them. Okay. So they need to be sure, that student athlete needs to be sure before going and putting himself in that portal. He needs to be sure he has a solid offer from wherever his assistant coach is going and leaving and going to. Okay. So, and I talked about did a podcast on do college recruiters lie, you know, and as I shared during that podcast, I shared that. Thank you, Kelly, for joining me. Appreciate it. And freelancer Suwan Khan, appreciate you joining me on Facebook Live. Um, but as I was saying, I did a podcast on do college coaches lie? Of course they do. Okay, they're not perfect. They're human. Some of them mean well, but and as I shared in that podcast, they're trying to feed their family. They're trying to get the next opportunity because they've been traveling and they're moving their family around a lot. And sometimes they succumb to the pressure of landing, some legitimate recruits because that's how they keep their jobs. And I don't care if it's a male or female coach. It doesn't matter what college sport it is, male or female sports. It doesn't matter. Recruiting is the same. It doesn't matter. And so, yes, you will get some coaches who will lie, make false promises. Oh yeah, you can start your freshman year, blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff. Some coaches don't. Some coaches are legit and straight up and say, no, you're gonna have to. I mean, of course, I think most of them do tell the kids they're gonna have to put work in. But some of them will oversell that. Oh yeah, man, I see you playing your freshman year, blah blah blah, by your sophomore year, and then if that some of that stuff doesn't happen, and if that so happen that assistant coach is leaving and going somewhere else, and you got somebody who didn't recruit that young man or young lady. Um, and so now it's a whole different or new relationship they got to build. Some kids, may not have been raised well to know how to adjust and do that. So that's why I don't think it's fair to call today's student athlete soft because there's a lot of different things going on, a lot of different things that are happening, right? Um, but like I said, you want to, as a student athlete, you want to be sure that you have a firm opportunity, right, to transfer, okay, with that assistant coach, whether it's assistant coach leaving or not. If you're going to be transferring, you want to be sure you have a firm email in your inbox, a letter of intent, national letter of intent, just like NLI, national letter of intent. As a transfer student, you need to be sure that you have a solid transfer opportunity before you put your name and leave your scholarship and have to go walk on somewhere, right? So before leaving that school, you better make sure that if that assistant coach is telling you the truth, because some things may happen when that assistant coach land at that new school, some things may not be able to, go the way that they sold for you to go. Okay. So you need to make sure you sit down with your parents. Even some, I know Coach Harvard, who's back at CCC where we coach. I know he's dealt with those things, and sometimes a student athlete may come back to him that's in college and ask his advice. I've had, one of my former student athletes um, DM me and ask me my opinion on possibly transferring, because they potentially may have an opportunity to go to the next level and play some NFL, some pro football, and they ask my opinion. So and I know Coach Harvey, who's listening on my IG, he's done that. I've had conversations with him in the past where he's when I'm back home and we might talk or discuss a kid or something like that. He's had opportunities where some kids have asked to come back and ask his opinion because he coached at the college level. He was a D coordinator at a D2 program. He worked at FSU as a strength and conditioning coach, so he knows personally. And and I'm just hoping I get him on as a coach. I plan on getting him. And so, Coach Harvey, if you're still on here listening on IG, just know get you on my podcast and talk from a high school head coach perspective and you know what parents and student athletes can do to better their opportunity. But like I said, this student athlete needs to be sure that they have a solid offer. Whether it's with assistant coach or not, leaving their program, they better be sure um, that they have a solid offer from that assistant coach that has leaving their program. Because, like I said, these assistant coaches are the ones that, in most cases, have a strong relationship. A lot of schools, coaches have their program set up to where each assistant coach has a responsibility for their kids that they recruit in their area of responsibility that they recruit to oversee those young ladies and those young men that they recruited when they sign and come to that school. They have a job to do to continue to oversee and try to help these kids make sure their mental health is good, make sure that they're focused on developing themselves, making sure they have their academics in place so they can play, right? So they can perform and have that opportunity. And so these are some legitimate reasons, like I said, other than being labeled soft, that the transfer portal has a lot of movement, okay? Because a lot of assistant coaches are moving more than head coaches. And now we have the NIL opportunities that's being interjected, right? That is being used to help move the needle with transferring. Okay. So yeah, there's been some people complaining about it, some high profile coaches. I know Nick Saban had said something about it one time, you know, um, and several other coaches, but you don't really hear a whole lot of complaining from coaches about the transfer portal. Transfer portal has been around for, like I said, for as long as can remember. Okay. I had the opportunity to transfer when I was in college, but because of lack of knowledge, because of potential lack of funding, being my mom was a single mom, and I lost my father to cancer at a young age when I was in high school. Um, you know, I considered transferring when Coach Jim Lovett was at Kansas State before he took over and started the football program at University of South Florida years later. But when he was at Kansas State, when he left Morningside, where I was, um, he had reached out to me and had asked me about possibly transferring to K State, and I considered it, but because of lack of knowledge and lack of funding, I just said, hey, we got a good coach that came in at Morningside, and I decided to stay, and it turned out to be okay. But there were some guys who did transfer and left. Okay, so like I said, you know, we got this NIL stuff that's moving the needle with the transfer portal as well. And even when these assistant coaches leave, and they know they're being asked, you know, do you have some young men, or do you have a young lady that uh, have the ability to come play here, or may not be happy where they are, and can you bring some people with you, possibly, right? Um, so we shouldn't blame the student athlete for taking an opportunity to get an NIL opportunity that maybe was promised to them or her at their um, initial institution that they signed their scholarship for, and because whether assistant coach is leaving or not, or another school because the student decided to put themselves in the transfer portal with very little guidance, but they're in there now, and they may be a pretty legitimate transfer kid for some school. I know Boston College, back where my son played, they took quite a few, like maybe 6 or 8 transfer kids. Okay, and I had a podcast that you need to go back on YouTube where I talked about that as well. About the transfer portal. Okay, so go back to Love the Game 24/7 and listen to that. Subscribe. Okay, be sure you subscribe to my YouTube. Follow me on IG and and other social media platforms that I'm on. That Love the Game 24/7 is on with Coach Smith. But I talked about that. So about the NIL and the transfer portal. So we can't necessarily blame them because, hey, somebody overpromised and underdelivered. Okay, and yes, you as a student athlete have a responsibility as well. Okay, you gained exposure and got yourself this opportunity to play at the next level. Um, so you got to be sure that you deliver on your promise as a student athlete, young man, young lady. Okay, you have a responsibility as well because you have a contractual agreement on that scholarship that you're going to perform in the classroom and in your sport, right? To maintain or to retain that scholarship that you have. Okay, so let's just be sure, we don't, put blame all on the student athlete. Okay, these student athletes aren't just doing this stuff, just willy nilly, haphazardly. There's some, like myself, who didn't have a lot of knowledge and understanding about it, may have made a move when they maybe shouldn't have, or maybe it was a great move. Okay, and they're speaking to their family member and getting guidance as best they know how. Okay, um, and I know there was a time that we all wish this NIL opportunity has been talked about for years, even when I was in college. So that's another reason why we can't get calling these student athletes soft, because we wish we would have had an opportunity, NIL opportunity. I know I wish um, I had an NIL opportunity where I could have made some money. Like I said, my mom was a single mom, right? If I could have had opportunity, NIL opportunity with a school, of course I'm going to consider that. Absolutely. I'd be crazy not to, right? Like I said, my mom didn't have a lot of money. My mom only saw me play one time in college. And she happened to see both me and my brother one time, my freshman year in college. We went before University of Central Florida moved up to Division 1. uh, my freshman year was their last year, and UCF had recruited me, and that was one of the things that they tried to recruit me about was, hey, we're going to be moving up to Division 1. You may want to come play, stay home and play at University of Central Florida. And I considered it, but they wanted me to play DB and not running back, and I was an all-purpose running back, and that's where my heart was, and I stuck with what I knew I was best at. Okay, I would have been a decent cornerback, but I knew I was best at being an all-purpose running back, and I ran all over them that day, that Saturday back home. But I'm gonna tell you why I did. Because if I'd have had an NIL opportunity to be able to fly my mother to more games, I would have done it as well. Because the best game I played in college, one of my best games, I should say, I won't say the best, but one of the best games I played in college was that game against University of Central Florida, because my mother was sitting in the stands along with my pastor from my church, my youth pastor, had a lot of family that came to that game in Central Florida to watch me and my brother. And that was like the only time anybody had ever seen us play since we had left home and went high school and went to college up in almost 2,000 miles away. My mom didn't have financial means to be able to fly up to Iowa, okay, North Dakota, Minnesota, South Dakota, all these different places where we played. And we didn't play down south. Our conference was mainly in the Midwest. So my mother didn't have the means. If my father was alive, oh, I know he would have made every opportunity to get as many games as possible. So that's where I can see where NIL would have, you know, be a huge benefit. And most athletes, how well would some of these guys play? Because a lot of these young ladies and these young men, parents can't come to every game, can't come to a lot of games. They may not have the means. Some people, I think more people do today than in the past. But there are still some student athletes whose families don't have the means to be able to watch them play. But as I said, one of my best games in college was because I had my mama sitting up in the stands, as well as a lot of other people. And if I had an NIL opportunity when I was in college to be able to have her come to more games, who knows how well I would have played in some other games. Now I was focused, so I always played hard. But I know it's something different when you got a family member, when you got your mom or your dad sitting in the stands, right? You have family members, people who had a huge part in helping you get to where you are in college. That if they could be sitting in those stands watching you perform, you're gonna it just takes you to a whole nother level a lot of times, right? So that's where we can't sit here and get say that a student athlete is soft because they want to transfer, or because maybe some things were overpromised and underdelivered on. And they may be hustling and doing their part and working hard. And they may have played some as a freshman. You know, Playtime may not even be an issue with them in some cases. A lot of times it's a relationship thing that you have to understand. Okay. And as I said, you have a lot of movement with assistant coaches more so than you have head coaches moving around every year. I know some young men right now um, that are assistant coaches in college that I know personally that have moved around quite a bit and are tired of moving their families around. And they're looking for that opportunity where they can make a decent income and leave their family stay put. But these assistant coaches are trying to, get their next opportunity as well. And because of the relationship they built with a young lady or a young man that they recruited for their sport, that you know, if they move, that sometimes affects a kid. And I know sometimes when new coaches come in, just like when my new head coach came in, he flat out told us everybody wants to get on D.R.I.V.E.N about what he said to the kids when he took over Colorado. I had the same conversation with my coach at Morningside College Division II football. He came in and said the same thing. Look around, because some of the people that you see in this room may not be here. And he was, and because he was trying to elevate the program, which he did, he elevated that program to be more successful. And there were some guys that, you know, he felt wasn't going to help take us to that next level, take our program to the next level. So they weren't on scholarship. That's nothing new. Deion just put it out there and said it. But that's a conversation every year. You best to believe that coach from University of Washington, when he get to Alabama, you know, there's some guys already. There's a bunch of kids in Alabama transfer portal that are leaving. So like I said, what's in Tuscaloosa? Nick Saban is gone. Okay, so unless you get somebody that can replace kind of what Nick Saban has done, these kids are, you know, deciding to go elsewhere, right? So we can't always, stop always putting the blame on the student athlete as if they don't know what's going on. These kids know more about what's going on than you realize and what you think. Okay. Now, of course, like I said, I know there's some small bit of truth, right, about the term soft, due to how some student athletes are being raised today. We have a lot of single parent homes, okay, and mainly mothers trying to do their best in raising their young student athlete, their young person, their young son, their daughter, who's a very good athlete. But we still need to be careful about how we use that term and not lump, okay, all student athletes under, that term calling kids soft, right? Because that's not the case. You know, it's causing us to blame the victim, the student athlete, more than what we should be blaming. We have to make sure we look all around. It's not just the student athlete that we need to be looking at. Of course, we got to learn to educate our student athletes more. I think it's a responsibility of parents first, and then as a high school coach, I know Coach Harvey on IG that's joining me shares that same sentiment. That he feels he has a responsibility to continue even after his kids have gone on to college, um, whether they're playing the sport or not, because he's had a relationship with a young man or a young lady, because he's a high school administrator, teacher there at Florida Central Catholic back at CCC. So you have a relationship and connection. And so a lot of kids feel um, led to come back and talk, to him, I'm sure, as well as some of you all that might be on here. So yeah, initially it's a responsibility of the parent. Um, but coaches, you have a responsibility. And to me, if you're not willing to take that responsibility as a high school coach, maybe you need to find another profession. But it's about building young people, young men and young ladies. And so I know Coach Harvey does a great job of that back there, back home. Um, and like I said, our uh, you know, like I was saying, that there's a lot of single moms trying to do their best uh, in raising their young lady or a young man that's a very good student athlete. Um, and like I said, however, coaches are along with that, coaches are more and more particular about what type of student athlete, okay, that they are recruiting today. Okay, um, this is both male and female student athletes. Coaches are going to be very particular. For instance, I did hear Deion Sanders say, and like I said, he was probably just brave enough to say it, where a lot of coaches feel the same things, feel the same way, that he mentioned, that I saw on IG, um, where he had shared that he's recruiting, or he looks to see if the recruit that he's recruiting comes from a two-parent home. Because in most cases, when they come from a two-parent home, there's a good chance they have some stability. They have um, a little bit of more know-how, you know. And so, uh, not that he doesn't recruit uh, a kid that comes from a single-parent home, because he does. He just says that he looks for that in a lot of instances, because he may feel he have a more mentally stable child, student athlete, in a lot of cases. That's not necessarily true, because it depends on what type of house that kid was raised in. There's some trauma, things going on in the home, and you don't know. But um, that's something that he mentioned, and I'm sure that's something. He's not the only one. He didn't just come up with that himself. I'm sure there's other coaches that feel the same way, right? And the idea of a student athlete having a two-parent home, like I said, can sometimes be viewed as more stable. Um, but like I said, it depends, on that household. And like I said, these coaches are really looking. Okay, these coaches are really looking to get to know the student athlete and their family, right? Um, even if they aren't from a two-parent home. These coaches are really looking, doing more and more. As things have evolved, right? They're looking to see, right, what type of family situation this student athlete is growing up in, and who are the influencers in their life, right? Because sometimes you need to, in order to get to land a young lady or a young man in your program, it may not just be mom or dad. It may be some other. Could be an uncle or coach or something like that. There's some other influencers in that young person's life, right? And these coaches are seeing that, right? They're understanding that, and they're working on really trying because they want to um, be sure that they get a good understanding about this kid's household, and how they're going to have to deal with this young lady or this young man when they get them up in school. That's the whole thing. That's why they're also monitoring these young people's social media, the student athletes' social media accounts closely, right, to grasp a better idea of what the student athlete's interest is, okay, or what kind of individual they want to know, what kind of individual that they're recruiting that's going to represent their institution. Okay, whether you agree or disagree, it is what it is. I know back when I was at University of South Florida working in the financial aid office, and I used to I helped student athletes with their financial aid. I did a lot of that, and I even took some time to go over um, to to the football office and get a view of what they were doing there. And I remember when Taggart came in and took over, he had this room set up with monitors on a wall, and then he had some stations, all the sports management students, grad assistants, um, you know, probably getting some financial aid, work study money, or whatever the case, and they want to go into the business of sports. And so he had this room set up with his wall with kids ranked on who they're recruiting and who was their top recruit at every position. He had them ranked like the top 5 or 10 kids at positions, but he had these grad assistants in that room monitoring the student athletes that they were recruiting. And I'm sure the other sports teams were doing using that same room. It was a pretty big room, but they use that to monitor you student athletes social media account. So whatever social media account that you're on, these coaches know, they're looking at it, they're watching, right? They're looking to see what interests you have, because you got to represent their institution. Okay, so as a student athlete, you got to be responsible, right, on managing your social media. You definitely got to self-evaluate. I'm going to have a discussion about self-evaluation coming up. I may do it next week during the Super Bowl, leading up to the Super Bowl. I may do it one night next week, but we'll talk about self-evaluating and some ways that you can self-evaluate as a student athlete. But you got to be responsible in managing your social media account. I stayed on my son about that. Parents, you got to be responsible in helping them manage their social media account. And sometimes these kids will have a private social media account you might not know of, but you better ask them. You better put them on the spot, because these coaches, they got some savvy, young, smart people in those colleges and universities that know how to find that stuff. They know how to find these private social media accounts that your mom and daddy may not know about. Uh, but you be rest assured, they're giving you hundreds of thousands of dollars for scholarship money and to represent their institution. You don't think they're going to do their homework? You don't think there's some savvy people in these colleges, these kids just like you, your peers that are at these colleges, that are college students that are very smart and know how to work around that computer and find stuff? Okay. Well, these coaches are going to dig it out. They're going to find it, right? It could hurt your NIL opportunity if you don't know how to manage your social media account, for some of you out there. Okay. So be smart. Don't mess up your opportunities. Use some wisdom. My wife tells me all the time, she's a registered nurse over 30 something years, a master's degree nurse. Okay. She's a nurse educator, right? She's a professor for going on almost 15 years, uh, teaching and training young nurses. So when those of us who are older get sick, be rest assured my wife has done a good job. She doesn't play when it comes to teaching her nursing students, right? But she tells me all the time, these young people, when you're talking about managing their social media and making wise decisions, she tells me all the time that I forget the name of it, but it's the front part of our brain that helps us reason. And she says all the time, these young boys, these young men, the girls, we know is always said that females um, mature faster than boys, and that's true. But girls have their issues and things as well too. But But these young boys that when they get these pro contracts and they're 22 years old and getting millions of dollars, these NFL pro sports teams, NBA, all of them, WNBA, they're all going to do their homework because, as my wife has shared, at that young age, especially the boys, their brain hasn't totally developed that helps them reason. We hear stories all the time of a guy speeding, or we see on IG these boys on social media doing crazy stunts and all this stuff, and they just think they're invincible. And my wife says, they'll do some risky, scary stuff. And a lot of you out there have seen it, or you got friends, you student athletes out there, you young ladies and young men out there have friends, peers that have done some silly stuff, and you've done some silly stuff. I've done some silly stuff. Thank God, because of how I was raised, I didn't do too much silly stuff, but I had my times of doing some things. Man, what was I thinking about? I was at that age, right? So you have to help them manage that. Like I said, as my wife said, that front part of their brain, these young men, hasn't totally developed at the age of 22. Sometimes she said it can be between 22 and 25 years old before that part of their brain has fully developed to help them reason. And as you see, as they get older, they start, you know, reeling back on some of the crazy stuff that they did as young boys, right? So that's why parents, you got to be involved. That's why some of you coaches, who have the understanding. That's why you got to be involved to help these young ladies and your young men that you've had the blessing of coaching and being in their lives. Where you got to help them understand, manage that social media. Don't mess up your opportunity. Okay, these college athletic programs at all division levels, right, are requiring their student athletes, uh, you know, to attend the camps, to help your recruiting, before they give you a scholarship. These coaches want to put their eyes on your young lady, your young man, your young student athlete, and have them come to the camps. Okay, and that's why I said you want to start this at a middle school age. Okay, you want to start this stuff at a middle school age, to help these programs at these different levels to get to know your young person, and for your young person to to get some clarity on how this thing works, how this business works with recruiting. So we don't want to wait. I didn't have the blessing of knowing this stuff until my junior year in high school. I believe my recruiting would have been better if I'd have had this knowledge and did some of these things in middle school. I put myself on the map. Um, However, but it was just one summer that me and a bunch of buddies went down to University of Miami and did a great job down there, which is where Coach Harvey played football. Coach Harvey was on that last national championship team at University of Miami. Um, so he knows how things work. He's a Hurricane, and that's I'm a diehard Hurricane still. But that was the first and only camp I ever went to, and that was after my junior year in high school. But I know if I'd have gone probably in middle school, if I knew about this stuff, right, I would have given myself a better opportunity to be heavily recruited more than I was. But I jumped on it as soon as I learned some things. And like I said, with this 10-week digital course, we're going to talk about that during this 10-week digital course with these 10 modules that I put together. And I'm going to hit on 3 topics every week that we're going to discuss. But like I said, if I'd have known some of these things when I was in middle school, if my parents would have known about this, I know I would have had better recruiting. So that's why I'm telling you, parents, you got to get your young person started in middle school, because your young person need to know if they really love this sport, or what sport it is that they really love. Okay, and it may be more than one, and that's great, to help them develop. But they need to experience what it's going to be like in their sport by going to these camps. They need to understand what competition is out there that they're competing against when they go to these camps. It helps them see what other kids are, that there's some other kids that are just as serious or more serious, or that they're right on track with where they need to be, or they see they got some work to do, that kind of thing. And so I definitely say about 7th or 8th grade, you need to have your kids like I did my son, right? Now, I'm not saying, he was blessed to make it to the NFL. Everybody may not be blessed to make it to the NFL, but you could at least get your college education paid for and possibly get you a scholarship if you're developing. And if you are that type of student athlete, young person that enjoys, and parents, you got to be sure that they still enjoy and love the sport. There's a serious side to it, and you need to explain that to them. Okay, I remember I had to have these talks with my son when he got to that Power Five Boston College and realized that, hey, they're they're about you preparing and being ready for your sport. and they expect you, hey, you should know how to get your academics. They have some things in place, of course, tutoring and all those types of things. But they expect you to still put that time in for your sport, even though you got studies um, that you have to take care of as well. So that's why it's good to start them at the middle school age to get some exposure, right? To help them develop. Okay, you may end up going to the same camps sometimes, and sometimes you need to go mix it up and go to some different ones. But if there are some different schools that your student athletes likes or enjoy it more, you want to continue to get them to go in there and build a relationship with those coaches. But understand, like I said, a lot of these assistant coaches move, right? And then if you find an assistant coach takes a liking to your young person, to your student athlete, your young lady, your young man, and they move around, you want to be sure you find out where they're going. Today, it's a lot easier. You can just Google them and find out where they, what program they went to if they leave. And then you want to show up possibly at that school if you can, where they left and went to keep that relationship going, right? Or at least be sure to get your video and things out there to them. Okay. Um, so just understand, um, you need to help them become familiar with that and understand the new atmosphere of college athletic recruiting. Okay. And so this is becoming a regular concept, right? To encourage student athletes to come to camp. And then I remember when I was getting recruited by Boston College and some in Iowa State, they all asked, "Hey, can he come to camp here?" Because that recruiter, needs the head coach to put eyes, or that OC or that DC need to want to put eyes on him, okay, and make sure that they got a legitimate athlete when they're out here with other kids and see how they perform and see how they handle competition, right? Because when you get to that college level from high school, everybody's good. Everybody at the high school level is not good, and that's why you probably are heavily recruited as a young student athlete, young lady, or young man, because you're probably one of the best in your city, best in your county, one of the best in your state, right? Um, and so they want to be sure that you come to these camps and meet up with some of the kids from around the country to see how you match up, to see how you mentally handle competition or somebody that's equally as good as you are. Okay. And I wanted my son to experience that so he'll know what kind of work he needs to put in. Okay. So that's a good thing and why you want to do that. Okay. And I just think today's student athlete really is much more business savvy than, they have more knowledge today than what we had. And a lot of them, so like I said, let's not fault them for calling them soft because they're much more business savvy and they understand the environment and how to with social media and the World Wide Web and all these different things. Our kids are just more intelligent, and I think the other reason why they are is because they had us. I didn't have a father that could tell me about playing college sport. Okay, as a young black kid growing up, you know, my father grew up in a time where there wasn't a lot of opportunity for a lot of them. Okay, and there was a lot of different dynamics going on to where he couldn't tell me, "Oh yeah, son, I played college football and this is how it goes." No, but as we grew up and he learned that there are more opportunities for his kids than what it was when he grew up, he made a point to let us know, hey, you guys can get scholarships to help you in sports and different things and keep your academics up. My father was also an educator. He worked for General Electric, but he also taught at, he was a substitute teacher. Um, so he was big on education as well and playing sports. And as I remember him talking to us, like, yeah, you can earn a scholarship. And so being that I went through that experience, and as well as people in my generation, we were able to teach our kids about what to look out for because we were blessed to have that experience. So these student athletes today, because of that, because of our generation being able to tell our kids and give them better information, and there's more opportunity for them today um, than in the past. They're much more business savvy. They understand, right? So let's not fault them because they have that business savvy about them and they understand some of them. Some of them don't always understand, but their parents do, right? Or the parents have some sort of idea, or they know somebody like me. There's some people that know me and know that me and uh, my brother, older brother, both played college and pro ball, had the opportunity to do that, and had college scholarships. So it's like, okay, somebody knows somebody. Oh, let me reach out to Jeff because we grew up together, and he had a son that played high school and college ball. Let me reach out to him, or let me hit him up and ask his opinion or his advice. So these kids are gaining and have access to much more information than what we had growing up. So that has a lot to do with um, um, why these young boys and girls are much more savvy in understanding, and why they may put themselves in a situation where they might want to transfer. Okay, but like I said, you have much more movement with these assistant coaches than you do with the head coaches. Um, so having opportunities, these students have opportunities via social media. So these young student athletes now can benefit from what we ultimately hope for, that would have happened when we were in college. I know I always heard talk about it. So, we've been saying for some time now that the student athletes deserve to be paid um, some money for, to help draw their respective programs, to increase the visibility of their respective programs, in many ways and through different medium outlets and different things like that. So we shouldn't blame them for that. All right. We seem to have forgotten, what kind of money is being generated in college sports, right? The video games that used to have, the NCAA video games, all those different things um, that had went away, that the NCAA and some of these institutions made a lot of money with, and the TV money and all this stuff is much more bigger now today than it ever has been. Um, and so let's be careful about what we say when we use the term soft with today's student athlete when we don't know the full story of that student athlete situation, right? We have to be careful. And so I just want to take some time and share that about how we need to be careful about using that term, because I don't think necessarily these kids are soft. Um, like I said, there's a bit of truth to that, possibly, but it's just a different day and time, and we just have to learn how to navigate through it and how to educate and how to help teach our young people and our families how to best use these opportunities as they come. But I do appreciate some leverage, because when you had head coaches being able to lead programs, and sometimes coaches would restrict kids from transferring when a kid maybe wasn't happy with where they are, and sometimes coaches would use it in a negative way, and that was not good. So we had to get a handle on that, because there were coaches, okay, head coaches that wouldn't release a kid to be able to transfer because the kid wasn't happy and they missed a year of playing college sports. And to me, that was totally unfair. If a kid is not happy, let them go, let them move on. Okay, things didn't work out. All right. And so I've been there. I considered it when my son moved to wide receiver from quarterback. When I knew if Ryan Day was still at BC, he probably would have played quarterback. But things changed. But ultimately, I laid it out for him on how things were going to go with him moving and changing positions. And he wanted to stay at BC because he was happy there when he could have transferred. Um, and ultimately, it was his decision. But as a father, I had a responsibility to let him know, okay, you have some options if you want to stay at quarterback, but if you like it here and you're willing to change positions, hey, then that's your choice. But this is how we're gonna have to navigate through this. Okay. Because there wasn't a lot of passing going on that should have happened that I felt that would have helped them win some games. You know. So in dealing with that situation with my son, I know personally he decided, because he had a good relationship with some teammates there, and he was okay with making the change. And I knew he was a good enough athlete to make a change. He could play. He could have been a DB and would have been, great at it as well. He's just that he loves the game and just that knowledgeable and just that athletic to be able to change. But I knew he was better at quarterback. But it was his decision. He made the change, and he still got himself an opportunity to play at the next level, and has done a great job of transitioning. So I'm proud of him for that thing and sticking to his guns and what he wanted to do. And as a parent, I said, okay, but I'm gonna just give you the information on how I know things are going to happen. And if you're okay with that, hey, then let's go. All right, let's put the work in. Let's do what we have to do to help you solidify your opportunity to try to go to the next level. So I thank you guys for joining me. My time is about to be up on IG. So be sure now. I'm usually here every Wednesday night at 6:30 Eastern Time and 7:30 or 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time. So Wednesdays, nights, and Saturdays. But like I said, every night coming up this week up to the Super Bowl, from Tuesday on, I'm going to be live at 6:30, between 6:30 and 7. So I appreciate you guys joining me. Take care until Tuesday night.